Sup, everyone? It's your boy Brandon, and welcome to another episode of Discourse. We have a great show for you planned tonight. And before we begin, I just want to say thank you to the Benjamin Dixon Show channel for hosting us, and also remind you all that you can, slide on over to the SoundCloud. Wow, slide over to SoundCloud.com. It's really hard to pretend like I talk like that. Yeah, you can go to our SoundCloud, SoundCloud.com/expanded discourse, where a lot more material is posted. If you haven't already, a lot of interviews, a lot of special content, just great stuff. And if you find it in your heart, please feel free to become a patron of the Discourse. And that's my needless, shameless plugs and all other stuff handled early. So, great show planned for today. You know the spiel. I have my panel with me. Richard, say something. Let them know you're alive.
I'm here. I should be.
Unmute your microphone.
I should be unmuted. Folks should be hearing me, I think, out there on stream. So thanks everyone for showing up and listening, watching, and checking out the stream, for sharing especially, and those that can contributing to the Patreon. It's a lot, and it helps out a lot. And I was just thinking over the last week about how much I really appreciate how much people have been enjoying the show and sending that feedback. And so I appreciate the comments and the positive feedback I've been seeing all over. So that'll be my piece.
We've been having a great response, Richard. Something wrong with your microphone. Try to figure that out while I introduce the rest of the panel. Adair, my Socratic life partner. Tell him about yourself real quick.
I'm doing well. I don't know, man. I'm happy to be here. Forgive me if I'm not paying attention, but I am talking to somebody on Tinder, so I'm going to be on my Brandon tonight.
You wish. And rounding off this lovely square, my favorite white ally, John. Say hello, John.
What's up, everybody? Glad to be back again.
Great. So let's jump right into it. So last week, for many of you have probably heard, there was a bit of a, feud between CNN and Donald Trump, right? That I guess you would say escalated with Donald Trump reposting a GIF and/or GIF, depending on how you pronounce it. I can't remember the proper.
It's a GIF.
I'm a GIF.
It's not GIF. It's not GIF. I would say it's not GIF. That's a furry thing.
It's GIF. Good. It's a goddamn G. So you pronounce it like goddamn
anyway,
G.
It sounds like GIF.
It was a relative. Yeah. I mean, it was a relatively but for him being president, it was a relatively innocuous GIF of him of the CNN logo, photoshopped over the head of a wrestler back in it must have been the early 2000s. I remember I watched that episode of wrestling.
It was Vince McMahon.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that storyline of wrestling pretty vividly, because it ended up with Vince McMahon getting shaved or something, and Donald Trump beating up CNN. That over the past 2 days ago, around 2 days ago, as of today, that escalated with CNN pseudo doxing the Reddit user Han asshole Solo. God. Yeah, right. The person who made the GIF and posted it to Reddit, in an attempt to, I don't know really what the attempt was to do with this, right? Like this, it seems they spent there was about a few days upon the GIF being published that there was kind of this narrative that it was promoting violence against the media. I didn't really see that. It didn't really scream promoting violence to the media to me. But let's get some opinions on the initial reactions to the GIF. John, you tell me how you felt.
The guy was posting racist memes, but that aside, that was clear coercion and threat from CNN, and that was doxing, pure and simple. And as someone who has had to hide my political beliefs from my employers for fear of getting fired, that is a clear threat to me. The fact that a major media platform and a major network is then saying that, hey, and I can read the parts right here. I mean, I've got the article up by K-File, and CNN reserves the right to publish his identity should any of that change. And referencing his apology. And the poster himself, after confirming his identity, he sounded nervous about his identity being released and asked not to be named out of fear for his personal safety and for the public embarrassment it bring to him and his family. And then after one paragraph, CNN reserves the right to publish his identity should any of that change. That's a threat. that's coercion. I don't agree with the guy's political beliefs. I don't agree with the memes he was posting. I think they're racist and anti-Semitic. But at the same time, it's a balance of power. That Redditor has no power, and CNN has a platform with millions of dollars and millions of viewers.
So, I mean, let's definitely talk about that a little bit more, right? So the initial statement that was issued by CNN over Twitter, not say an initial statement, claimed that the guy apologized. He posted an apology on Reddit for his behavior prior to CNN ever reaching out. I'm sorry, prior to CNN ever speaking to him. And I'm sorry, the initial statement they said was after they reached out to him, he posted the apology. Then upon getting backlash from that, they said it was before they.
No, but the post itself says on Monday, K-File attempted to contact the man by email and phone, but did not respond. On Tuesday, Han Solo posted his apology to the subreddit and deleted all of his other posts. Then the next day, he spoke to K-File. So, like, they reached out to him, they left him a message, and then he deleted everything. And then he tells them, hey, I'm afraid for my identity being posted. Please don't do that.
No, the issue was, the point I'm going to make is that upon getting a blowback from this whole thing, the whole feedback from online, they claimed that they hadn't spoke to him at the time the apology was posted to Reddit. Obviously, that's a bit of a weaselly way to say, like, we reached out to him, but we didn't have direct contact. We didn't go back and forth. He knew we knew who he was at the time of making the apology. But Adair, stop sexting for 5.
I'm not even sexting anymore.
Tell me what you.
I'm flirting, but
okay.
but
tell me what you of the Jeff.
I feel like it's an issue that they did blackmail. Like, I have zero problem with racists being doxxed. Honestly, I think KKK that what's happened right after the Mike Brown murder in Ferguson was a great thing. A lot of racists were exposed. A lot of them were doxxed. These were people that were working as cops, correctional officers, everyday folks. If you're going to post racist shit online, I don't feel bad if someone comes by and exposes you or sends your information or your racist shit to your personal employment. I do have an issue with blackmail, and that's exactly what CNN did. CNN did not just like, this is so-and-so, they posted this GIF, here's a bit of background on them based on their Reddit, saying all this racist shit. I have zero problems with that. But I do have problems when you're essentially trying to leverage them because you felt personally attacked because they made a GIF of you, of your logo getting beat up. Like,
that's the thing, right? Like, they went like, for a few days they tried to pretend as though this GIF was promoting violence, and I keep going back and forth between pronunciations, as this GIF was promoting violence against the media. It wasn't really. It's like it came across as a little bit of salt because CNN, as we know, is only barely more trusted than Trump is. And, the mainstream media is not a particularly trustworthy institution in America anymore for a variety of reasons, right and wrong. And it comes across as a little bit, it's childish and petulant. Like they didn't go after Han asshole. So, and I agree with you, Adair, right? This is not an issue of me caring about whether racist or get doxxed or not. It's just like, this is not an issue of me caring whether, like, racists become exposed to the limelight. This is an issue of seeing. This is not even an issue for me of balance of power. This is an issue for me of intention. And there is no way you can convince me that CNN gives a shit about racist, like the racist machinations of what's going on Reddit. Like, there's no way you can convince me that like CNN. I would love, honestly, if CNN was going to start going vigilante and start exposing, they don't start exposing the identities of these people in these communities, because the community in question was r/the Donald, but they're not. But that wasn't the motivation, you certainly can't convince me that CNN is trying to make racists afraid to proliferate online when CNN is also responsible for platforming Richard Spencer. Like those two things don't work in my head together. You can't say, okay, well, CNN really cares about racism and making sure the internet is not a safe space for racists, but also they want to make sure that this, and we throw around the word Nazi a lot, right? Because words have meaning, and it's important to label. Even I think it's important to even call proto-fascists. A lot of people are just proto-fascists and dickbags Nazis, because it really communicates the road that they're on, and as a slippery slope to full Nazism. But Richard Spencer is an actual Nazi. It's like Richard Spencer is an actual Nazi, and they platformed him and they made his message available to hundreds of thousands of people. And now you're trying to convince me that they care about racism and anti-Semitism? No, Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean that was part of what really stuck out to me. It was, and what made it really hard for me to swallow was how CNN basically did like what we saw from Tracy before about when he had that run-in or confrontation with the congresswoman, and made it a big deal out of nothing. And so CNN, seeing some of the journalists there genuinely straight-faced try and make a case that this was, a dramatic assertion of violence on it, but then they didn't really have the same type of reaction to something like the NRA ad, which I think was a much more overt call for violence against leftists and against the left in general. So that to me is one, along with everything that you guys mentioned as well, but that especially stuck out to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is not needless concern trolling to me. I just don't think CNN has the right motives in mind for this. Mm-hmm. It's like they definitely don't. Right, like this is all about their pride being hurt, because functionally what they should have done, and this is not where I want America to go in terms of political discourse, but they should have just had an intern make a GIF back.
Yeah,
people.
Yeah, I feel like there's a SpongeBob meme that would have been appropriate or something.
It would have been an appropriate response. It would have showed it would have been an appropriate reaction to what happened, or you ignore him. You don't try to convince everyone that you've been the victim of violence.
Yeah, if you want to still convince people or try and portray that you're a legitimate news organization, at least, just ignore it. That would have been appropriate.
But if you do that, right, then you're letting the Donald Trumps win in the world, because one mean gif about your shitty company is equivalent to actual violence because your little company's feelings got hurt, and you can't make a gif back because then that's too childish. But you can sure as hell go on ahead and blackmail somebody, even if they're a literal piece of shit like this guy is.
Hey, wait. Where did Adair go? Why is Eichenwald in this group? Like, what happened there?
What?
You didn't hear about Eichenwald suing somebody for tweeting him a GIF? Like that's essentially what I feel like CNN. They just escalated it.
Eichenwald was almost that's different story. Eichenwald was almost killed by a meme. So I can understand him being more upset about this, but really, for me, I think people are trying to compare this to a Nazis being punched. It's nothing like that. This is nothing like Nazis being punched. Only superficially is this kind of holding Nazis to account for what they do. And again, CNN has no interest in actually combating the material causes or structural causes of racism and anti-Semitism. They have no interest in combating, making sure the message doesn't proliferate. They just got their feelings hurt, and they went out there and they dug up dirt.
Or the violence. I mean, there's plenty of violence that's a part of all of this as well.
Yeah, and there's plenty of violence. They proliferate the military-industrial complex message basically wholesale. And frankly, what was troubling to me, and this might sound again, me just speculating needlessly, but they obviously went out in search of what this guy was about, and they could have found anything. It's they really could have found anything about him, and I want, or even her. They could have found anything about him or her who did this, and most likely him. Let's be honest, but anything. And what would this conversation be looking like if it wasn't for the fact that he was a racist and anti-Semite? Or at least performing that role online, as we've talked about in the past, because that's really how people communicate at a certain point. But what if he was just posting dick pics to our After Dark, or whatever it's called, or our Guys Gone Wild? What if he was just writing weird, creepy, sexual Harry Potter fan fiction? Would they have still threatened to expose him too? Would they have still reached out?
Probably.
And see, that's where it becomes a problem, where it's this wasn't done because he was a racist. His racism was incidental.
Yeah, and like I was gonna say about that, getting back to me, I would have been fired from my last job had my account ever been found by my employers, just because of how really conservative they were. And to have that threat over my head was one of the main reasons why I remained anonymous on the internet for so long. And to have a major multinational corporation who, like you said, got their fifis hurt and decided that they were going to threaten this guy, that speaks to me on a whole different level. I mean, what happens if Neera Tanden comes after me? Right now it's just nothing.
Well, here's the thing. Now, considering how effective Neera Tanden is, it'd probably still be nothing.
But she did get what's his face fired.
Well, that's true. She's effectively getting people fired, just not winning elections. But
right. But that's my point. Is that what if how is this weaponized identity going to be used in the future, rather than, this, like you said, this time it's incidental that he was a white supremacist, and so they can use that against him. Well, what if next time, what if he's something else that he's ashamed of? What if he's just gay but not out of the closet? What if he's, I don't know, anything? I can't even think of anything other that he might want to hide. Just any type of information that he might want to hide, that they can dig it up on him and threaten to release it.
And frankly, this is not really even news, though, right? Because if you make an argument that this was news, like his identity was news, that the person who came up with this GIF was news, then you have the responsibility to release that identity. It's like you don't, like, as a news organization, you can't just go, okay, well, this identity is news if he does something again, but it's not if it's like, but if he doesn't. It's like, no, like, it's either it's important enough to publish or it's not important enough to publish. Like this is actually holding someone to, like, a hostage, and I'm saying, like basically it's coercion, it's blackmail. Like it is what it is. And I mean, people who are out there defending it are defending it on, like, again, they are defending it on the lines that this person is a piece of shit. And I guess, for people, the casual observer of this show will go, hey, but you guys don't really, you guys don't speak out when Nazis get punched. You kind of just, like, look the other way.
We applaud it. We applaud when Nazis get punched. If you punch a Nazi, I will personally give you a gold star.
Well,
yeah, I'll contribute to your legal defense.
I mean,
all right, Trump.
I'm against political violence in all forms, man. It is what it is. Anyway, but this is not that, because, again, there are other issues at play. But I didn't, I wanted to segue into a conversation, because the whole CNN thing to me is, like, it's troubling. It blew up out of control. Like, Donald Trump's Twitter account to me is not something that should be ignored, because it has actual implications of it. Because, like it or not, he is the president of the United States of America. So there are implications to the things that he's tweeting. Other world powers are looking at it. Other world powers are, like, are trying to parse out what he means when he tweets out, negative stuff about their leaders. But, like, the CNN GIF thing, that was kind of just, like, it was what it was. But I wanted to switch gears real quick and talk about, do a little thought experiment, right? Because an article came out in the New Republic this week called "Blue Exit: A Modest Proposal for Separating Blue States from Red," and it's by Kevin Baker. And so, the piece itself, this particular piece, I want to say it's satire. It comes across as satire to me because it's a little bit overblown. It makes a lot of points about how the Democratic Party was asleep at the wheel. They were trying to convince their electorate that the Republican Party was this fringe party that was going to go away, and that they had, everything in lockstep. Everything locked down. And functionally, that blew up in their face, and they lost, 1,100 seats over the course of 8 years. But the larger thrust of the piece is that the red states are living off the teat of the blue states. That they are in fact suckling at the federal government's wage that's largely being paid by blue states. And sans context, it's a satirical piece meant to, like, illustrate a lot of issues with the discourse and how we break down things in blue and red, and how, like, the perception of Republicans as being federalists is kind of a joke. But we can't separate that from the context that this is a conversation people are actually having, right? That people are talking about specifically. And I recall Dan Savage said it's on Real Time with Bill Maher, and by recall, I mean someone told me, because I don't watch Real Time with Bill Maher. If you're on Real Time with Bill Maher in 2017, you're a piece of shit. Casual reminder.
Yep.
If you've ever been on Real Time with Bill Maher, I mean, like, we can't just put a 2017 cap on that. I'm like, that guy's been shit forever, but that's digressing.
Bill Maher's been shit for a long time, but as of 2017, let's say mid 2016, because I believe in being generous. If you're on Real Time with Bill Maher, you're a piece of shit. You gotta stop, because Bill Maher's only power is that he can platform people, and that's why he gets away with a lot of bullshit.
Unless you're there just to tear him down, maybe.
But this is the conversation that people are having, now, at least especially liberals, because Marcos Melidos was known for trying to, like, make fun of the people dying in conservative states for whatever reason. And to me, it's indicative of, again, sour grapes, right? That the Democratic Party just is not prepared, and the liberals are not prepared to actually, like, wage this ground war against the Republican Party, and that some of them do want to pack up their bags and leave. But Blue Exit is problematic for so many different reasons, and I'm going to open up the floor to get your get everyone's impressions about the idea of the Democratic Party, Democratic parties going forward what I want to say is a plan to emphasize on urban areas and to the divestment of rural areas, et cetera, et cetera. So, John, what do you think about
it's a sure way to lose every single state house and every single governorship in the entire country, which will then give the Republicans a sure path to calling constitutional convention, doing whatever they want. I mean, Schumer said it beforehand. For every rural voter that we lose, we're going to gain two moderate Republicans in the suburbs of Philadelphia. That was their plan. It's been the plan since the DLC first came into power, and it's lost, like you said, Brandon. It's lost so much, and it's going to continue to lose. But what it does is it allows them to not capitulate any ground to the left, and to still take gobs of money from their donors. So, when you see these same people like Marcos, who's just at this point just a Dem fanboy, and Joanne Reed pushing this theory, it sounds to me like they haven't really thought it through. All they're thinking is, well, this will allow us and our favorite people to go. But I mean, I'm looking at the Texas election results right now. 52.2% voted for Donald Trump, and 43.2% voted for Hillary Clinton. So you're just going to abandon that 43.2% of voters who might actually need your help and would vote for you in the future to whoever? It's a bad strategy.
Also the non-voters. Don't forget the non-voters. Because there's been a lot of strategies floated out this week about what the Democratic Party should do. So this is just one of them, right? That they should just pack up their bags, divest from red states. Another one that was written by Mark Penn, and was it New York Times op-ed? I want to say New York Times because
the one that said move to the right if you want to win.
No.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is
to the center. It said center.
Yeah.
Which is there was one that literally said Democrats, you have to run to the right if you want to win. And I'm pretty sure that was the one in the New York Times.
Yes, it was. It was Penn. And Lee Fang just reported that Penn is heavily invested in Republicans actually winning because he owns stock in a Republican think tank.
I mean, of course, but all of these things just smack me in the face of the Democratic Party has learned the wrong lessons again. It's just they look at the results of the election. They look at the people staying home. They look at Bernie Sanders being the most popular politician in America. They look at Jeremy Corbyn. They look at people, in the streets for single-payer health care, for living wages, for no war in Syria, no war in Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
No wars, period.
No wars, period. And what they think, no fracking. What they hear is, we should become more racist, and we should get the front man of Third Eye Blind to run for president. And but go ahead.
I mean, here's the thing, though. Because I really want to dig into kind of what they're talking about specifically when they say, let's just divest from red states. There is no such thing as a blue state. The reason why you see states that are considered blue are they have heavy metropolitan areas. You see states like California, you see states like New York, you see states like Washington that have these major concentrations of population in urban centers. Seattle, LA, New York, etc., that have the ability to carry an entire state. But if you want, when you talk about divesting, you're going to divest from Washington because the vast majority of the state is incredibly conservative. You're going to divest from Oregon. You're going to divest from large parts of California. You're going to divest from large parts of New York. And when you say that you're going to divest from these places just because they don't fit into your political views, I think that's really, that is showing your Republicanism. That's showing you don't want to win. That's showing that as far as you're concerned, your ability to profit off of an election is so much more important to you than the actual needs of the people. These people in these countries, in the more rural parts of the state, these people in these red states desperately need help. They need somebody to come in with actual ideas and say, here's how we're going to fix your problems. That is what Democrats aren't getting. They continue to say, oh, we're the big tent party. We're the party that cares about people. But you don't. You cannot say that and at the same time have large, because this isn't just limited to one op-ed. This isn't limited to a couple people in the party. This is a very widespread idea within the Democratic base. It's people that consistently vote for Democrats. Just on Twitter today, I was seeing an interaction between Michael from PA and somebody on Twitter, and her response was, beware of poor people with progressive ideations because it's really just a hustle. They just want to scam you. This is a Democrat. This is a Democrat. Like, this is an issue. Y'all cannot abandon poor people because they want the Constitution to be followed. Sorry, that's my cat. You know, when it says the government will take care of the general welfare of its people, that includes universal health care. That includes
don't you start quoting Constitution. Well, we're gonna get a lot of people to saying you're calling for revolution. Don't you quote the Constitution on my show? I don't want to be tried for treason.
You know, right?
No, but like it, you make a good point, and I mean, I guess what's becoming really, really clear, especially as what also came out yesterday, were like the theoretical bumper sticker designs for the DCCC, and by now everyone is aware of that. One of them says like, vote Democrat 2018. I mean, have you seen the other guys? Which was a joke I made like almost 9 months ago. Like at that point, it was a joke. I mean, it wasn't even a clever joke because obviously that's the Democratic Party's brand. It's like, we're not them. It's like people have made that. A lot of people who are Democratic Party loyalists, or at least cultural Democrats, rather people who identify as Democrat but don't really engage with the party, have started to make that realization too, that Democratic Party their whole shtick is, we're just not Republicans. Like what does that mean? Well, we can't really tell you, but we're not them, so don't vote for them. But I think what's becoming very clear that the Democratic Party did not have a plan, a leadership plan, sans Hillary Clinton. The idea that Hillary Clinton, CAP, the Neera Tandons, the Joyanne Reeds, the Democratic Party, they were so banking on Hillary Clinton winning that everything that they want to promote was predicated on her being president. That's just what it is. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Richard.
Oh yeah, that's exactly where they left it. They had planned everything around such a thing, and they didn't also cope with or grasp the idea that if somehow she did lose, that then people would be pushing her out of the party, as in, like, they thought that everybody would just feel sorry for her and would welcome her back with open arms, like, oh, wounded champion, it's not fair, the sexism was just too great, we'll embrace you and turn you around next time, and this one, the third time's a charm, that's what they were expecting if everything else failed, or at least after the initial time of when she had lost the presidency. They thought that perhaps after some time people would be able to embrace her again, but they didn't predict that there would be this strong string of folks that were still upset about what had happened and how things had been handled, and were not going to welcome her back either towards the presidency or let alone just to be a member of the Democratic Party. And so now she's found this place as, running some super PAC king or queen maker organization that we'll see how that gets handled over time. But go ahead.
I guess my point was largely that the Democrat Party doesn't have a bench. They have literally no bench. They have no up and coming leaders. They have no one to run.
Well, they cleared it intentionally just for fear that person might usurp Hillary in some way, shape, or form, like Obama had. And so they wanted to make sure it was bare.
I would part of that I would say yes, but part of that I also want to argue is that what we're seeing is a generational shift. And a generational shift in this case is going to be a motherfucker for the Democratic Party. It's going to be a motherfucker for the two-party system as a whole. Because what you're seeing is a lot of people that would be those up-and-comers, a lot of those folks that would have been the people to take over the Democratic Party's leadership don't want anything to do with them. Because as we're starting to see millennials get into this group, where we're the ones starting to run for Congress, we're the ones starting to take over these political parties, in which in some states we're seeing, in Washington, maybe 10 or 15 millennials that I know have actually taken leadership positions within the party. We're seeing a lot less engagement because there's a fundamental difference in what we believe the government should be doing for its people. The millennials as a whole are socialists. Millennials prefer socialism to capitalism. And so that creates a fundamental schism between us and the Democratic Party. We want to see things like we said, universal health care, which most people support. We want to see things like a universal basic income. Again, people support this. We want to see free college, et cetera, et cetera. Because of that, there is no place for these people in the Democratic Party. So because the Democratic Party won't evolve, that's part of the reason why they have no bench. They have nobody to come in and replace these outgoing leaders.
Well, let me be very clear. Democratic Party is not the party of urbanites, right? I think that claim by Dan Savage is inaccurate. It's and I actually had to look this up, right? I wanted to look up the voting demographics for urban areas, and you know, New York City had like a 50% voter turnout for presidential elections. It's like the voting turnout in urban areas is actually incredibly low for a variety. It's suppressed for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons being, you know, the two-party system, and you know the way in which the winner-take-all system functions. Like it by nature suppresses the vote and disenchants voters. But like, there is such a huge dichotomy that exists in urban metropolises that is often forgotten when we talk about these places being liberal bastions, right? It's like, and so like that's one of these issues where Democratic Party likes to present themselves as though like, well, we're the party of the urbanites, like, you know, like these inclusive liberal cities, but New York is a shithole. It's like, I live in New York City. A lot of people I know, they didn't bother voting because frankly they didn't see any difference between Hillary Clinton and I know I live in inner city New York City. They didn't see any difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Like, I didn't feel that way, and I talked to a lot of them, and one of the people I will never forget, one of the people I talked to a 19-year-old on the day of the election, and I asked him, I'm like, hey, you know, why, you know, did you vote? And he was like, no, you know, I was at a gym, and I was like, I think you should vote. You should really vote. And I was like, why aren't you voting? And he's like, I'm 19. I don't want my first election to look like this. I don't
just in denial. Like, no.
You know, no, yeah, he was like, I don't want my folks. I don't either. He's like, you know, she's gonna take New York City anyway. I would prefer my first election not look like this. And I was like, because I mean, I guess he wanted to believe a little bit more in the system, right? Like he wasn't like quite at that pragmatic where you gotta hold your nose and vote for, you know, the lesser of evils candidate thing.
Well, I think that's part of the generational shift.
Yeah, well, I think there quickly. I just wanted to say, I think that there is a legitimate component to the urbanite idea, just in that there's some concentration of where Democrats typically are able to get majorities or able to win currently. In that, so there's the talk of the legislators are being independently drawing the boundaries to prevent gerrymandering, and Democrats thinking that that's going to be a boon to them. But there is an actual issue of them just losing rural parts of America all over the country in all states. So just having an independent person draw the boundaries isn't going to help the geographical problem that they face.
When I say Democratic Party, the party. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, I'm agreeing with Richard. You know, just having an independent party drawing districts won't help at all. It's, if you're not getting a message to the majority of the people, which is not the small group of people that the Democrats have crafted their message for since the 80s and the birth of the DLC, you're not going to win. If you keep offering a shit sandwich, eventually people are going to say, you know what, I'm going to stop going there.
See, that's my point, right?
I think can't just point to that the other one has more flies on it.
Right, exactly. It's still a shit sandwich. I'm not fucking eating.
Yeah, see, that's my point, right? So like, this whole "we're not the other guy's" strategy is not a good strategy either. Like if it were a good strategy, I would say, oh, okay, well, you know what, people are gonna die, but they might win some seats, right? But the thing is, it's not even a good strategy,
right?
Like, it's not, and here's why: because if people recognize, and the vote was suppressed for the last 8 years, because President Obama offered a lot of, you know, ideas about hope and change, did not deliver on them. People, like, the recovery was kind of concentrated in the top 1%. A lot of people didn't notice material differences in their life. You know, if you live in Flint, Michigan, your water wasn't clean regardless. It's been like, what, 27 years since they've had clean water. You know, like the idea that the other party, that you can win elections by the other party being bad, is not necessarily a bad idea, but you still have to have a proactive message. Because if you prove yourself to be materially useless, like if you go out there and say, okay, the other party is bad, notice how bad they are. People are not going to vote for them, but they're also not going to vote for you because you've proven that when you're in power, you're not good. It's like you're still bad. They won't come to you to solve your problems if you're not offering an actual solution to their problems.
Right, and that's exemplified by the ACA versus the AHCA. I mean, Matt Bruning did that great graph. 650,000 people will die by 2025 if we go with the AHCA, but 450,000 people will die by 2025 if we continue with the ACA. Single payer? Nah, that nobody. Now, we're not talking about anything other than deaths attributed to lack of access to health care. So why is it that the Democrats aren't pushing for single payer? Because that's a material change that would cost money, and their donors don't want it. So again, we got a shit sandwich for you, and we're not going to affect any material changes in your life, but we're not quite as bad as Republicans. It's not a winning message.
It's like, but we put some cucumber on it, though.
Right. So. I mean, that's kind of what they're trying to sell, and that's a big part. And there's someone in the chat, I want to make sure I get their name right real quick. Ben Weissman said, people don't understand that the working class is not just white people, and neither are rural areas. Nothing wrong with whites, but something to point out. And I think that is a really good. It's something that's very important. It is very important to point out, because there is a fundamental difference between talking to working class and poor people and talking specifically to working class poor whites, or rather in the Democrats' case, not talking to them. Like specifically cutting these people out because, like Brandon has said, they feel that they have these, they really do represent the aristocracy in these coastal cities, in these urban areas, the urban elites. They represent that group of people and that group of people alone. So for the Democrats to do anything, Democrats to move forward, they have to fundamentally change the message. And the problem is they don't want to. They don't want to stop being the shit sandwich because as far as they're concerned, well, enough people vote for us that we won 2 presidential elections by saying, look, the other guy's worse. Just because they didn't win this time against arguably the worst candidate in history doesn't matter.
They didn't.
Facts don't matter to these people. It's dogmatic at this point.
They didn't win those 2 elections because of that, though. They won. Obama won the first election because he had like a legitimate, pseudo populist message that like kind of tricked people. They won the second election because Mitt Romney is about as exciting as clipping your toenails is.
Wait, and I just want to mention that
that's not what we heard. Like that's not what we heard from local parties. What we heard was Mitt Romney's. We heard that John McCain is racist and that Mitt Romney is too rich to deal with you guys, even though Obama's rich as hell. Like, that's what I was told out here in Washington State. That's what they were campaigning on. They were campaigning on Obama's hope and change. They were campaigning on he's black and he's not the other guy. That's what they campaigned on.
John McCain was never a challenge to President Obama getting elected. Hillary Clinton was. Hillary Clinton was a much bigger obstacle to overcome than John McCain ever was going to be.
I just want to say quickly that neither party is looking out for poor people, like especially for people that are not able to get a job. Like if you can't work, nobody's arguing for you. It's always working poor or the people that have jobs and all that stuff. And so it's like the folks that are out there that are just struggling on their own and aren't able to get employed and aren't working and most of the time that there's nobody really advocating for them as far as the party goes. So I just wanted to add that in.
Well, no, so that's what I was going to say earlier. The Democratic Party is not the party of urbanites. They're the party of like upper middle class urbanites. They're the party of gentrifiers and CEOs who live in New York City because a lot of the urbanites, the black urbanites, the poor, the working poor in cities, like they were left unaffected by the pseudo recovery. Right.
Oh yeah.
And so if you look at the demographics, like right, they could. In New York City, I would say New York City has the best and worst schools. Like has the best and worst school districts in America, and it all has to do with the way wealth is concentrated in the cities. And so we get to this point where the Democratic Party is claiming they represent that their path to victory is urban centers, but they don't even really represent all of urbanites. It's like they represent a very small population of cosmopolitan people.
Very true. I mean, again, but this is something I feel like we've talked about a bunch on the show, at least in the past, is Democrats don't give a fuck about poor people. Nobody in these political spheres actually cares about poor people. All they care about is 1, re-election, and 2, how much money can they make. That's really all that matters to them. All that matters to the Democratic and Republican National Committee is how much money can we make. That's all any of these people care about. They don't care about any of these issues. So when they come out and they campaign on this stuff, it's just a lot of times it's platitudes. It's we're going to sell you this idea, but we're not actually going to do anything about it. So until there's a fundamental shift, we won't see anything change. We won't see any actual representation for regular, everyday, average people in Congress. And I say that as someone who's lived both in an urban center and who now currently lives in a rural area. There's no jobs. There's just not. People talk about, there's all these jobs, the recovery this, the recovery that, the recovery here. There's really not. And then when you start parsing it down into different sectors, when you talk about people of color, you talk about college students, you talk about X, Y, and Z, it gets even more complicated as to who has the jobs and who doesn't. One of the things that we're hearing out here is just from being around other college students, is a lot of college students of color are being passed over for some of their white peers. While that's happening, college students in general aren't getting jobs in favor of people that lost their jobs during the recession, who have 20, 30 plus years of work experience and are willing to work at whatever job they can get. That also complicates the job market. So there's all these different factors that nobody wants to talk about. They just want to say, well, look at the jobs report or look at the lack of jobs in this jobs report, but none of them actually wants to get down and solve the issue. One of the things the government should guarantee is work. If you're if you're a disabled person, if you're a person in the United States and you're a citizen and you want to work, the government should have a job for you in the discussion.
Well, I mean, see, I bring this
to Nick on the takedown about that too. I'm sure he'd like to hear you.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, John.
I was saying there's plenty of things that we can be doing too. I mean, you look at the state of the roads. I mean, if anyone wants a job, union jobs doing road construction actually pay really fucking well. And yet we're not doing any of that work. And that's kind of my field. What I did for a long time was construction like that. It wasn't quite like that. I mean, granted, I was doing slightly different on the water, but you know, those jobs, that infrastructure repair and those jobs are needed, and yet we don't fund them. And now you have Trump talking about this infrastructure bill where he's actually just giving like a massive tax break and incentivizing and privatization to major corporations in order to sell this as jobs. And the Democrats have nothing. The only one who's pushing back on it is Bernie, because you know, the donors are going to make out like bandits in this, and the Democrats aren't really pushing back on it, much like they're not pushing back on how he's going to pay for some of it with reimportation of tax-free money overseas. So their message sucks. They're not doing what they need to do, and they're going to continue doing that. Like Adair said, they care about money. And secondary, I'd say they care about re-election only because it's a way for them to make more money.
I mean, agreed. I think one of the best examples of this is, you know, what came out 3 days ago was that Rahm Emanuel, Chicago, under Rahm Emanuel, has launched this initiative to basically withhold people's diplomas, high school students' diplomas, if they don't have a job or college acceptance letter at the time of graduation. So in order to actually graduate from high school, and this is all framed under the idea like, well, we're trying to build real citizens and, public engagement and all these sort of lofty liberal ideals. But really what it comes across is, well, it comes across a lot of ways. It comes across that way initially, but when you realize that Chicago has one of the most underfunded, poverty destroyed school systems, like they're struggling to keep doors open in Chicago right now. School doors open, like they're struggling to fund their community colleges. They're struggling to pay for counselors at these schools. And Rahm Emanuel is saying, oh, well, you won't be able to get your you won't be able to get your high school diploma if you can't demonstrate that you're ready to move on to the next step of your life, because we want you to be thinking about that. But for the vast majority, for a large portion of these students, specifically students of color and students from poor neighborhoods, they just don't have the access to the resources, and if they do, they don't have the access to the that means like their lives are in some ways wrought with stress by their material circumstances, that trying to think that far ahead or that extra pressure in terms of graduation is not actually going to help them, right?
Right. The problem wasn't that wasn't a requirement for graduating. That was definitely not the problem with the Chicago education system.
The other problem with that whole thing was the military aspect of it.
It's a poverty draft.
Right, it's a poverty draft. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. They're literally accepting an acceptance letter into the military as a way for you to get your degree. I mean, with what's going on and what we know, they're pushing for regime change in Iran and Syria and also possibly other places around the globe. And, we're going to have a long, drawn-out war, and this, to me, sounds like one of the first steps towards making sure we have the armed forces ready to do it.
But here's the thing, and I don't remember, Brandon, if you also went to an underserved school. I know Richard did, but going to an underserved high school, like, had this been a requirement for graduation here up in Tacoma, I wouldn't have graduated. I would not have been able to graduate high school had it been a requirement. I'd either join the military, I did not want to, find a job. There's not jobs in poverty-stricken areas like Tacoma. Like, it's hollowed out. It's being gentrified. There's not jobs for people right out of high school. And I wouldn't have been able to get into college because when you go to these underserved schools, I don't remember one time sitting down and having counselors come to the class and be like, okay, here's how you fill out a college application. Asking students, where are you interested in going to school? What do you want to study? X, Y, and Z, all these other things that I'm seeing happened to some of my siblings, one of my siblings, who does go to a high school in a more affluent area, where they sat you down as a freshman and said, where do you want to go to college? What do you want to study in college? X, Y, and Z. That right there makes a huge difference in whether or not someone goes to college. I left high school not knowing how to apply. I left high school not even knowing that there was financial aid. I did not know what the Pell Grant or FAFSA was until my last 2 weeks of senior year, when my AP teacher pulled me aside and said, hey, did you know that you could go to college and get grants? Like, if you don't, there's no support system. There's nothing there to help these students. So all it's really going to do is drive. It's going to drive up military enlistment rates. It's going to drive dropout rates. It's going to drive up violence. More people are going to turn to gangs and selling drugs, because that's what they have.
The issue for me is that metrics are like extra metrics are a poor substitution for actual education reform, and that's the problem. Like at this point, we have extra metrics, extra criteria for success, being used as a way to replace actual education reform. And by education reform, I don't mean adding more books to schools. I mean like a huge bucket of reform that take place in not only the schools in their individual buildings, but also like the communities, right? So I'm talking about, expanded Medicaid, expanding Medicare, like all, housing security programs, social security programs, all of the social safety net. But functionally what we're getting instead, this all comes after Rahm Emanuel is not paying teachers. Like, pay your teachers, Rahm. Pay your fucking teachers, Rahm. He's closing schools, and that's another one of my fears about this. Like this idea that this will be a way to this will be another way to determine whether or not a school district or individual school is failing, because
it absolutely will be.
Yeah, and therefore a justification to close them and build more stadiums, right? But they said this is the poverty draft. This is the way, because like ultimately the options for how you get your diploma are you can go to college or community college, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Chicago does have tuition assistance for basically you get guaranteed admission to community college, and I believe it's free if you have if you graduate with a B average in Chicago, free-ish to go to community college. Problem with that is that you don't need a B to graduate. So even if it is free, like that creates this gap. Right, where you earn your diploma for high school, yet you don't quite make to the point where you get free college, you get free community college, so you can't pay for it, which adds extra stress to your life, and it's this thin veneer of making actual changes and improvements to a system when really the Chicago, CPS, the Chicago public school system, it's just incredibly mismanaged. The money's just been mismanaged for the past decade and a half.
And I know in my particular school that a lot of the kids that were graduating, even with good grades, B averages or better from the high school, were still not qualifying for college level courses when they went to the community college. And so
holy shit. Yes. Can we, and that's something I definitely want to talk about, because that goes to your point, Brandon, as to paying teachers and reducing fucking class sizes. Do you know what the achievement gap is for students leaving underserved areas, for leaving urban areas, going to college and trying to do college level work? You know how many people I've seen? And so I'm going to get personal for a minute, folks. You can get mad at me, so I'm trying to make this about me, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell this story. I graduated from a high school.
Personal story today. I mean, you don't need to overshare, but go ahead. I'm just kidding.
I'm not going to overshare, but here's the point. It speaks to what we're going through. I went to an underserved high school. We graduated 48% of people across five high schools, something like 10,000 students. 48% of them graduated the year I graduated. Most of those students, I can think of 5 from my high school that have college diplomas right now. Going to community college, sitting in class with these people, you know how many of them did not qualify for college level English or math? They haven't even had to take remedial reading because their reading level was so poor that they could not function at a college level. So not only are you saying, hey, we're going to throw these extra requirements at you to graduate, but if you do graduate and you don't have the skills to succeed at college, then you just end up in debt. Because the people that we're seeing that end up in the most trouble with college loan debt are people that are unable to finish their degree, people that are not successful in college. So if the entire point of this high school career that they have right now is to shuttle them into the military, if someone for some reason manages to make it to college, then they just get caught up in this Ponzi scheme that is college debt right now. There is no help. We have to, like Brandon said, we have to pay our teachers. We have to reduce class sizes. We have to make it so that way the education system is student focused and not profit focused. We have to stop closing down schools. Like, that's not helpful. Like, all this is, like I said earlier, it's a poverty draft, but it's also it's absolutely a direct result of white supremacy. You're seeing this take place in Chicago, in an area where they're saying, well, there's so much violence. We need to curb the violence. We need to stop the violence. How do you stop violence? You get people in fucking school. You get people in school.
Chicago is not even that violent, though. Like, if you compare Chicago to Chicago, I want to say Chicago, and this is something I should probably look up before I say, but Chicago's not in the top 10 most violent cities in America. Like you said, what Chicago is.
I'm just going to look that up right now.
I think it's outside of the top 5 at least. But this came up with Rom talking trash about your guys' subway system over in New York.
And this came up with people with Trump threatening to send the military to Chicago in order to stunt down on violence. It's like, well, Chicago is not even as violent as I want to say Little Rock, Arkansas is in terms of like crime and some of these other places. What Chicago
I think it depends on where you're at. It's because like Chicago's violence it's in the South Side. It's in the black neighborhoods. It's in the areas where these policies are going to affect the most people.
Well, I wouldn't say with more like Chicago. What Chicago does have though is the vibrant black radical initiative. Like that's what Chicago does have. Like Chicago has a lot of black organized. I think Chicago is an urban area that has a lot of black urban elite. Like that is what Chicago has, and there's definitely a violence problem there. It's just not the most violent city. But the problem, but again, this comes down to an issue with urban centers, that there's this huge discrepancy between the rich areas of Chicago and the poor areas of Chicago, and while this might seem like a good idea theoretically, it speaks to the Democratic Party's priorities, which is like these shallow metric-based, means testing-based solutions to problems, as opposed to actually dealing with the structural conditions. Because ultimately, you can make class sizes as small as you want. You can make schools have as many books and as lavish as you'd like. You can make your school like fucking Degrassi, like straight with complete with Drake there. But ultimately, if your kid's coming to school hungry, like he won't be able to learn. If your kid is concerned about whether or not like he's going to have a home to go back to, or if there's going to be heat there, they can't learn. And so trying to decontextualize the environment, the total social environment and material environment in which people, are expected to educate themselves is, it's a fool's game. It's very easy to say, well, this guy goes to a nice school. Why is he failing? Well, it's because his father was, arrested like last week for smoking marijuana, and now he's never like that. That's just like the reality is that a lot of these families in these neighborhoods, like they don't provide conducive learning experiences. They have very little to do with the school itself sometimes.
And nationally, we have a very confusing system where you can end up in prison in one state for 25 to life for pot, and another one you could be making a multi-million fortune, in another state. So that's awfully confusing for folks to wrap their heads around morally and ethically.
Yeah, but I agree a little bit with Brandon, but I also want to push back on a little bit, Brandon. I mean, we can talk about the problems structurally in neighborhoods and the problems at home and things along those lines. But when you get right down to it, schools that are funded do better than schools that aren't.
Of course.
But it's both and. So, yeah, it is. It is both and. But, when we're talking about spending 54% of our discretionary budget on the military, and we don't have class sizes conducive to learning in any of the public schools that we have across the country, we've got a problem. And it's an imbalance in this country with how we allocate our resources.
It definitely. I would say I'm less concerned with. But I am concerned with obviously the way we allocate our resources in terms of military budget versus education budget. Like that speaks to our priorities. But more concerning is the fact that education budget is often tied to property taxes.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Because that's the bigger issue in terms of how it perpetuates the cycle of poverty.
Or the lottery. The lottery doesn't help either. That it's tied to the lottery either, which is often poverty tax as well.
Yeah.
Like a way to tax people who
and the way they do the lottery. And the way they do the lottery tax in Rhode Island is what they've done for the past 10 years is every time the lottery makes, X budget amount, they cut the school budget by X and say, okay, we're going to rely on this lottery money. And then the next year, well, what happens? Lottery money might come in at X minus 5. You don't know. But at the same time, they're still cutting the budget every year and relying on lottery money and lottery increases.
Or in Washington's
that's
case, they just divert it to other funds anyway. But yeah, continue.
It's,
Right.
It's easier to do that.
cycle.
Like,
I mean, for me,
because I agree with what this entire panel said, because I think we're each hitting on different aspects of what's going on. Because Brandon's right. It's hard to. It's impossible to not. I won't say impossible, but it's very hard to succeed at school when you go home and you don't have anything to eat, or you go home and you're being abused, or you go home and you see nothing but violence in your neighborhood. Right? Like that, it's hard to overcome those barriers. It's very difficult. It's a lot easier to fall into gangbanging and selling drugs if you're from a neighborhood, even if you're going to a great school. If you're from a neighborhood where that's what's going on, that's what you're indoctrinated with, that's what's happening, it's an easy trap to fall into. But at the same time, we have to fund schools in these neighborhoods. We have to make education something that people want to do. The number of people that you go to, the number of gangbangers that you can go up and talk to and be like, and just have a conversation. Sometimes people are like, I just was not engaged in school. They did not care about what was going on with the individual students. The class sizes were, too big. Teachers are one of our first lines of defense when we talk about societal change. A teacher in a classroom can have such a profound effect on a student's life, but we don't give them the means to do this. We put them in classes with 30 and 40 students and say, figure it out. We put them in classes with that many people. We don't fund them to have their classroom stopped. Students can't get school supplies. Kids are going hungry at lunch. Kids are going hungry at home. It's such a complex and interwoven issue.
And not only that,
there's no one strategy to get rid of it.
And not only that, this is not me shitting on teachers, because I think that teachers have, an important role in our society, one of the most important roles in our society. But a lot of teachers are also woefully unprepared to teach. In a lot of ways, the way we teach students is, well, not a lot of ways, our school system is reflective of our society's values. And, we talk a lot about police brutality in terms of racism, but we don't talk about is the school system as another like racist structure that exists within Black communities, another neo-colonial structure that exists in Black communities, because a lot of it's the same thing. Just like we bust in police officers from New Jersey to police Brooklyn and the Bronx and Black neighborhoods. We bust in teachers from out of these neighborhoods to also teach these students. I dated a lot of teachers for some reason. I don't know why. And a lot of them were white women, or at least non-Black people of color, and who live in Harlem and taught in the Bronx. And the cultural gap between them and the teacher and them, them and their students rather, was always like something that like they talked to me about or they struggled with. One woman I dated lived in Harlem, nice woman, great. She just could not understand the kind of cultural differences in help seeking that Black people have from white people, and like she couldn't understand why her students would not seek help from her. And I was like, oh, that's not a Black thing to do. It's just like help seeking. Help seeking is not something that is encouraged in our community the same way it might be encouraged in a white community. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not a thing.
I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, it's
but here's another issue.
I would say, whenever I think about help seeking in the Black community, I think about this one quote from Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, where it's just like, where the woman, this is a great quote, where the woman's like, therapy, when you're Black, you either help yourself or you find Jesus.
Yep.
And I'm like, she's not lying. She's not lying.
But like, here's one of the things, because I was just reading an article on this the other day, actually. It's the lack of Black male teachers, right? Like just for a lot of us, we don't I never thought about it until I read that article, but I only have one Black male teacher in 12 years of the entire time I was in K-12. I only had 4 male teachers as a whole. Like, so for me, there was not a lot of people that I felt comfortable going and talking to as a Black youth, as a Black male youth that was dealing with certain issues. So that's one of the things. That's one of the ways that we could actually start promoting equity, is we can get more Black teachers, especially more Black male teachers, into some of these schools. But Brandon's also right. A lot of teachers are woefully unprepared, and some of that is coming from different states. I believe it was proposed here in Washington State that they wanted to let just anybody teach. Like, you didn't need a teaching certificate, you didn't need a degree in education, you didn't need an undergraduate or graduate degree in education. You could just, if you wanted to teach, go right on ahead. And that's going to screw with the students. But I think that goes back to funding schools. That goes back to doing, because we fund schools to do teacher outreach, to go and recruit good teachers, if we pay teachers a decent wage, you're going to have more people that want to get into teaching. But we also have to be very aware of the cultural differences between our students and our educators. To be 100% real with you, a white teacher is not going to understand everything that a student of color is going through. And black teachers not always going to understand what an Asian student is going through. And somebody not from your neighborhood or a neighborhood that's very similar, someone who doesn't know what that struggle is, cannot come in and then suddenly just change the world. Like, that's not how this works. And that's another issue with some of these teachers. A lot of them do have these savior complexes. I see so many people that want, like, oh, I just want to go teach in an underprivileged black neighborhood. I just want to save these little black children.
So you're saying Freedom Writers was not a documentary? Did I get that confused?
Wasn't it though? Wasn't that a docu? Wasn't that like a docu? Wasn't that like based on a true story?
It was based on a true story, but it's been fetishized, right? Like, there's this fetishization.
What about Love and Basketball? Is that based on a true story too?
What?
What about Love and Basketball? Is that based on a true story too?
Shut the hell up.
I always forget.
But like,
I'm just there trying to look for that conversation where, so I've got hairs in places I've never had before, and I can't talk to my female teachers about it.
No, it's more.
It was like real talk. Some of the concerns I had were about the gangs in my neighborhood and being pressured to join a gang, or being pressured to sell drugs, or witnessing acts of violence in my community, be they drive-bys, be they people getting shot up. On my bus, people routinely got the shit beat out of them and physically thrown out of one of the emergency exits. Like, this kind of violence, I couldn't go to one of my white teachers who was not from this area and be like, hey, I'm being pressured into joining this gang and I don't know what to do. Because her response is to call the police, and that gets my ass beat every single day. So you become a mark.
No, but the thing is too, like, and so we also see the way this is reflected in, you know, in the intersection between policing and schools, right? So we know that people from outside these neighborhoods, we know that there is this perception by teachers who lack this kind of cultural sensitivity training that black students behave worse, that black students, you know, appear more dangerous, appear more adult. Specifically, I want to say specifically black girls behave more, you know, are viewed as more adult and more disrespectful than white women when you don't correct for implicit racism, and that has such, you know, dangerous implications for the school to prison pipeline. But yeah, I want to shift gears a little bit. I guess I do want to, you know, in the live portion of the show around here, but we're gonna take a little break. We're gonna take a little break. And we'll come back off air to finish this conversation and also talk about, I don't know, Trump escalating things with North Korea, Trump threatening CNN with, you know, Time Warner mergers, all of these other, you know, fun topics.
That's good stuff.
And, you know, yeah. So thanks for joining us for a live portion. Have a good night.
Brandon still sucks.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.